Hello everyone and welcome back to the Common Sense Crypto channel as with you. Always, this is Rich doing another video today on XRP, so I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Wherever you are in this great world, we're going to talk about XRP. And I got to start with this: for as long you've been holding your XRP, somebody along the way has told you, David Schwartz says, it cannot be cheap. And that's true. It can't be cheap when being utilized in transactions. Think about it like this. Say a bank was going to send $100 billion to another bank, or across borders you would need a 100 billion XRP, the entire supply. And we already know some of that supply is held by XRP holders. And then there's some in escrow and so on, when it has to be at a high value to move a lot of money on daily basis. Now people would argue and say, well, if a transaction only takes 3 to 5 seconds, the price really doesn't matter. But it does, because there's going to be so many transactions happening. You're going to have in 1 second, you're going to have so many multiple transactions happening across the XRP ledger. But how do we get to this high price point? How do we get to mass adoption? Because everybody always said, well, to get those high prices, we're going to need adoption first. People are going to have utilize XRP for its use case, its utility. Well, David Schwartz talked about mass adoption multiple times. Take a listen to this: without interoperability, there will never be mass adoption. The biggest one for me, particularly, is interoperability. You know, nobody would use the internet if it was just one website. And I think the same thing is going to happen with blockchains. There are going some that, like Bitcoin, are basically just to move an asset, and there are some like Ethereum, where you can bring any use case you want, but it's not particularly great for payments. Or it's not particularly great for like large-scale data storage. It may not be great for AI, but if we have all of these specialized solutions that don't work together, and people are going to constantly think about, when use an website, you don't have to think about what hardware they're using, what software they're using, how they connect. It all just works. We're going to come up with technologies that allow the entire system to just work for people, so they don't have to think, oh, my funds on this blockchain, or the token I want to buy is over on this other blockchain. And I see a lot of people who are we don't really know how to do that very well. Yet there are a lot of people who think when you're pushing a technology, it's tempting to say that it solves every problem perfectly. But we all know that interoperability is going to be something we're going to be working on for a long time. And it's just going to gradually get better. But I think like the very first step of that is token portability. And there's a lot of companies that I've spoken to who have really good solutions to that. And I think like that is the baby step that we absolutely have to have. But if people have to think about what blockchains they're using, what technologies they're using, then we're never going to get messed up. And that's why it's always never going to be one coin to rule them all. Everybody always said, well, why do you need QN XRP does this? Why do you need XDC if QN does this? It's going to be a handful of cryptocurrencies to run the entire system. And that's where we are already headed. And even Brad Garlinghouse talked about this as well. They were talking about the internet and how it's going to be utilized the same way inside of payments sign for mass adoption. But what else is it going to take? Well, user experience is super critical. You can't if you have to understand the technology in order to get it work. There was a time when you had to understand cars to drive a car. Yeah, to understand copying machines to have a copying machine. That we have to turn that corner. But I think the other thing is that we need products that meet needs that real people actually have. One of the things that I mentioned in my talk is like for most of us, we're very well connected to the financial system. And getting money into and out of a blockchain is not difficult for us. But if you're someone who doesn't have a whole bunch of money that you can just send off and not be able to get for a while, On-ramps and off-ramps are critical interoperability, like all of those things. But really what it comes down to is just the user experience has to be great, and it has to solve a problem. People actually have. It can't just be interesting. It's like, oh, really cool that it can do this thing, right? Has to solve a problem. People actually have. One of the things David also talked about on stage earlier today is he had been around in the earliest days of internet. Kind of the internet. 1, 0. I'm a lot younger than him, but I also was around. Why is that funny? I don't know. Oh, Frank shots fired. Like I was around those days as well, and I think one of the things that really catalyzed the growth of the internet Wero was usability. You know, Mosaic came out as a first browser that evolved into Netscape, that, trying to use some of these technologies that predated the browser. As we know it, I mean, people can't even think about the internet before a browser. But those things didn't exist until I think 9293. That was the explosive growth, and so I think again, when I about big picture where we're going over the next 5 years, 10 I think we are now focused on abstraction layers that can actually, we don't need to know how the technology works. We don't need to know how SMTP works to send an email, why do? And that's what it takes. Has to be where somebody uses it and doesn't even know that they're using it. That's what will lead to mass adoption. If people have to understand the technology, they're never going to use it. You're never going to have that mass adoption. People will use XRP without knowing it. You won't need to see or understand XRP to benefit from it. Banks and payment apps will use it behind the scenes, making transactions faster, cheaper, and seamless. Ripple allows financial institutions to move money and value instantly, cutting cost and eliminating barriers across the globe. XRP is universal, bridge connecting all forms of value, whether it's dollars, gold, digital currencies, or services. Ripple's technology creates a financial internet where money moves as effortlessly. Emails or videos online. A Finet says is coming in December of this year. So that's when I think we will start to see the flip of switch moment. But when people always talk about scarcity, this is why there will be scarcity. It's never meant XRP was really meant for retail investors to begin with. I mean, if you look at Ripple's customer base, it's institutions and banks. It's not really retail. We just got lucky enough to get our hands on it before the institutions got here. But when it's being utilized on a daily basis, that's when you're going to see those high prices. And as more banks on board and start utilizing this technology, the price will have to go up to accommodate all these new payments, all these new transactions that are going to be happening on a daily basis. And that's why it's so important not to sell your XRP, because if you sell at some point, you might not be able to buy back in. And even if you are able to buy back in, it's going to be at a very high price. And I stress that because people still don't think this is ever going to happen. They killed the retail investor with price suppression and frustration. Most of retail is already out. Anybody that bought XRP back in 2022, they most likely sold by 2023. Most, not everyone, because a lot of people did figure out what they're holding when they're holding XRP, but I see it all the time. If XRP goes sideways for 2 or 3 days right away, everybody wants out. Stable coins are just the tip of the iceberg. Tokenization is about to reshape global finance, and Ripple is at the forefront of it. Starts with stable coins, but then you have tokenized treasuries, commodities, funds, corporate debt, equities, derivatives, real estate insurance, infrastructure, art cars, and the list will go on. And because people are going to be tokenizing assets that they own that have value, and then they're going to be able to borrow against maybe a portion of that asset. In other words, say you own a Lambo and need some cash. So you tokenized a Lambo and you put out 10% of the tokens, and people invest in it, and that's how you would get money from it. But then you would eventually have to buy back that 10% of tokens. It's going to open up borrowing possibilities, but it's also going to open up possibilities for you to invest into things you normally would not be investing in, because most of the time, like real estate years ago, you had to buy the whole house, or maybe you got a business partner and you bought the house together, or maybe you went in with a group of people and bought a house with tokenization. You could just buy a piece of a house at as little $50. Think about that. All of a sudden, you take the return on investment and you keep reinvesting, and eventually, before you know it, you're making a lot of money off of tokenized assets by buying them and earning profit from them. But this is just the beginning of that as well by 2030. Two classes will exist: those who own ISO assets, those who serve them without knowing it. The choice is still yours for now, but windows close, empires don't. Wait, I thought that was a great post because it puts into perspective where you are right now. Hold a cryptocurrency that's part of a new financial system. Now think about the rise of that new system. Anybody didn't invest in it. They're left behind, and all of a sudden you're becoming massively wealthy. And you're getting generational wealth. You're getting monthly passive income. You could go and then buy the mansion. You could Lambo if you wanted to. Without even selling any of your XRP, you will be able to do that off of passive income in the future. Because these cryptocurrencies, they're built for high value. And that's what I see coming. Larry Fink: Bitcoin can dethrone the US dollar. Begs the question, if stablecoins are US dollar-backed, wouldn't that strengthen the dollar? You know, Larry Fink all of a sudden is pushing Bitcoin to the point where it's just unbelievable. Now he's almost up there with Saylor and Mers, or Jack Moeller, or whatever the hell his name is. He's up there with those guys because he's starting to talk just as stupid as they talk. Like Bitcoin W came to us from an AI of the future. Bitcoin was created by aliens in the solar system. It's like, listen, Bitcoin is outdated technology. It's not dethroning the US dollar. If anything, the is going to utilize something like XRP, strengthen the US dollar even more. But these people sell that hype every single day. This won't stop major US bank to close 60 branches nationwide, hitting 14 New York communities. And this is Flagstar Financial, recognized as one of the country's 30 largest banks, has revealed that it will phase out its 60 targeted branches. The bank consolidation is still continuing. You know, people thought this was over. Like all of a sudden, the banks were no longer had a liquidity crisis. There's still a lot of problems in the banking system. The way to fix it is on-demand liquidity. Will they utilize XRP to fix the banks before crash happens or after the crash happens? That's what we're facing right now. And even if the crash does happen, then rise of the phoenix begins. Celsius. Crypto victims demand life sentence for Alex Mashinsky, saying he devastated lives. You know, people took their own life over this. A lot of people lost literally everything, and a lot of people want to see him now face a life sentence. More than 200 victim impact statements, many refused, reviewed by Decrypt, have been submitted to U.S. District Judge John Kettle ahead of Mashinsky's May 8 sentencing, with the overwhelming majority demanding the severest possible punishment for the mastermind behind the failed crypto lender. I remember when that happened, and I remember a lot of people lost when this happened. And I think a lot of people lost everything. So hopefully he gets the same treatment as Sam Bankman-Fried. And then there's this President Trump says tariff money will be used to reduce or completely eliminate income taxes, with the focus on those who make less than €200 per year. I thought it was $150,000, now it's $200,000. But some people say it's all talk, and this is never going to happen. What are your thoughts on that? You think Trump is going to keep his word, and we're going to see the end of IRS eventually? One thing I would like to see is capital gains tax erased on US-made cryptocurrencies. I'd like to see him take care of that first. If he was to announce that right now any US-made cryptocurrency would skyrocket, like never before, you would have institutional players just buying boatloads of XRP XLM. I mean HAR and any other US-made cryptocurrency because everybody wants to avoid the taxes, so I would love to see him announce that first and then continue to work on this. But let's hope. It happens in 2025, there's no time frame for this. As of right now, if they put a time frame on it, I would be like, okay, it's likely that this is going to happen. And now we know when it's going to happen, but without a time frame, this could just go on until Trump is no longer the president, and I've seen other people say that he's going to drag this out until he's no longer in office. But so far, Trump has been very good for crypto. He kept his word on a lot of things. Let's hope this is one of them, and until it all happens, stay patient, positive, and let's get rich together. With that said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of you. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.